The words hung in the air of my living room, thick and oily like smoke from a cheap cigar. "It's time you let us sell this old barbershop." That Michael didn't look at me when he said it. He was looking at a glossy brochure spread across my coffee table. One of those places they call senior living communities. It had pictures of smiling, gray-haired people playing shuffleboard and taking watercolor classes. None of them looked like me. None of them had hands with 50 years of calluses from holding shears and a straight razor. Sarah, his wife, was nodding beside him, her face a mask of practiced concern. "It's just a burden, Arthur. The taxes, the upkeep. It's too much for you now. This would simplify things. Give you a nice little nest egg. Simplify." That was the word they used. They wanted to simplify me, sand down my edges, pack me into a neat little box with a label on it, and put me on a shelf. The barbershop wasn't a burden. It was an anchor. It was the last piece of my father I had left, the place where I had become a man, and where I had watched boys from the neighborhood become men themselves. It smelled of talcum powder and leather and bay rum, the holy trinity of a life's work. I didn't say anything. I just sat in my worn leather armchair, the one with the permanent impression of my body, and I listened. I listened to my son, the boy whose first haircut I'd given in that very shop, tell me that my life's work was now an inconvenience. I listened to his wife, who called me Arthur instead of Dad, talk about a nest egg, as if I were a hen who had finally outlived her usefulness. They saw a dusty old building on a street that was past its prime. They saw property taxes and plumbing problems. They saw a dollar sign, a way to fund their next vacation, or a down payment on a bigger house in their gated community where the lawns were all the same shade of green. They didn't see the history etched into the scuffed linoleum floor. They didn't see the ghosts of men who had sat in those chairs, sharing their triumphs and their troubles. Men who fought in wars, who marched for their rights, who buried their parents and celebrated their children. Men who had come to my shop not just for a haircut, but for a piece of solid ground in a shifting world. I looked at Michael's hands. Smooth, manicured, the hands of a man who worked with spreadsheets, not with steel. He wore a watch that probably cost more than the shop's furnace, a furnace I had patched myself last winter with a piece of sheet metal and a prayer. He finally looked up from the brochure, his eyes meeting mine for a brief, uncomfortable moment. "We found a great realtor, Dad. She thinks she can get a good price, especially if we sell to that developer who's buying up the block, a developer. They wanted to sell it to a man who would tear it down and put up a coffee shop with skinny chairs and bad music. A place with no soul." I just nodded, a slow, deliberate dip of my chin. It was the nod I'd learned to give over the years. The nod that meant, "I hear you, but not, I agree," the nod that bought me silence. It was a shield. They took my nod as a victory. Sarah smiled, a bright, relieved flash of white teeth. "Oh, good. We were so worried you'd be sentimental about it." Sentimental. As if 50 years of my life, of my father's life, was a dusty postcard you find in a drawer. They stayed for another 20 minutes, talking about their plans. Their son, my grandson, needed braces. Their daughter was looking at private schools. The money from the shop would be so helpful. They talked about my future as if it were a line item in their budget. They would help me sort through my things. They would handle everything. When they left, the silence they left behind was louder than their chatter. The front door clicked shut, and I sat there in my chair, the smell of Sarah's expensive perfume lingering in the air, a cloying, artificial scent that didn't belong in my house. My house smelled of wood polish and old books and the faint, clean scent of the soap I used. It smelled of me. I didn't move for a long time. The sun slanted through the window, painting a long rectangle of light on the hardwood floor, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I watched them swirl and settle. I felt like one of them, a tiny particle caught in a current I couldn't control, visible only in a certain light. But that wasn't true. I wasn't a dust mote. I was the house. I was the foundation, and they were treating me like a loose shingle. The decision didn't come in a flash of anger. It wasn't a clap of thunder. It was more like the slow, quiet turning of a key in a well-oiled lock, a feeling of rightness, of alignment. The tumblers fell into place, and something inside me clicked open. I pushed myself up from the chair, my joints creaking a quiet protest. I walked into the kitchen and put the kettle on. The familiar ritual soothed me. The scoop of coffee grounds into the filter. The pour of hot water. The dark, rich aroma that filled the small room. I made 1 cup. Black. No sugar. I drank it standing at the counter, looking out the window at the old oak tree in my backyard. My father had planted that tree the year I was born. It was a giant now, its branches sprawling across the sky. Strong. Rooted. It had weathered 76 winters. It didn't ask permission to stand its ground. I finished my coffee, washed the cup, and placed it back on the shelf. Then I went to my bedroom and put on my good coat. Not my work coat, but the heavy wool one I wore to church. I found my keys. The one for the house, the one for the car, and the big, old-fashioned brass key for the shop. It felt heavy in my hand. Solid. A key is a promise. It's a statement of ownership. I didn't drive to the shop. I walked. It was a cold evening, and the walk did me good. The crisp air cleared my head. I walked past houses where I knew the people, past the park where Michael had scraped his knee 1,000 times, past the corner store that used to sell penny candy. The neighborhood had changed, but the bones of it were still there. The memories were still there. When I reached the shop, it was dark. The streetlights cast a pale glow on the front window. The gold leaf lettering was faded and peeling at the edges. Arthur's Barbershop. EST 1948, inch. My father's name was James, but he named it for me. It's your future, son, he'd said, the day he first let me use the clippers on a real customer. I slid the brass key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying thud. The little bell above the door gave a weak, tinny jingle as I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. That sacred scent. Leather and talc, and something else, something like time itself. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. I just stood there in the darkness, letting my eyes adjust. The 2 big barber chairs were like sleeping giants in the gloom. Their chrome trim gleamed faintly. The long mirror on the wall reflected a dark, empty room, with my own silhouette standing in the middle of it. I ran my hand along the back of the first chair. The leather was cracked and worn smooth in 100 places. I could name half the men whose heads had rested there. Mr. Harris, the mailman who always had a story about a dog on his route. Deacon Miller, who would fall asleep and snore so loud the windows rattled. Young men getting their first real haircut before a job interview, their necks stiff with nerves and hope. I walked behind the counter. My tools were all laid out on a clean towel, just as I'd left them. My shears, my combs, my favorite clippers. I picked up the shears. The steel was cool and heavy. I'd had them sharpened by the same man for 30 years. They fit my hand like they were part of it. My son saw a burden. My daughter-in-law saw a nest egg. What I saw, standing there in the dark, was a sanctuary, a legacy. And you don't sell a legacy. You pass it on, but not to someone who thinks it's a burden, not to someone who can't see the soul of the thing. You pass it on to someone who understands, someone who will honor it. And I knew exactly who that was. David. David had been sweeping the floors of my shop since he was 16 years old. He was a quiet boy then, all sharp angles and nervous energy. He'd come in asking for a job, any job. I needed someone to sweep up, keep the place tidy. He was a hard worker. He never complained. He was always on time. Over the years, I'd watched him grow into a man. He was 26 now. He'd finished a 2-year degree at the community college. He worked a full-time job at a warehouse, but he still came in 3 nights a week to sweep the floors at the shop. For 10 years. He never asked for a raise, though I gave him one every year. He loved the shop. I could see it in the way he moved through it. He didn't just sweep the hair. He straightened the magazines. He polished the chrome on the chairs when he thought I wasn't looking. He'd stand and listen to the old men tell their stories, a small, respectful smile on his face. One time, my old record player broke, the one I played my Motown and blues records on. The sound of the Temptations was as much a part of the shop as the snip of the shears. I was going to throw it out, but David stopped me. "Let me take a look, Mr. Arthur," he said. He took it home, and 2 days later, he brought it back, good as new. The warm, crackling sound of Sam Cooke filled the shop again. "How'd you fix it?" I asked him. He just shrugged, found a schematic online, ordered a little part. It just needed some attention. It just needed some attention. That's what my son and his wife didn't understand. They didn't want to give it attention. They wanted to get rid of it. I stood there in the quiet shop for another hour. I didn't do anything. I just breathed it in. I let the peace of the place settle over me. The decision felt more right with every passing minute. It was a clean, sharp feeling, like the edge of a freshly stropped razor. The next morning, I didn't call Michael. I didn't call the realtor he mentioned. I called Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson was a lawyer, an old-school, no-nonsense man who had an office downtown in one of the older buildings with a real elevator operator. I'd known him for years. He'd handle my wife's will when she passed. He was a man who understood the weight of things. "Arthur," he said, his voice a low rumble over the phone. "Good to hear from you." "Everything all right?" "Everything is fine, John," I said. "I need to see you. I want to make a change to my affairs." We met the following day. His office smelled of old paper and leather-bound books. He poured me a cup of coffee that was almost as strong as mine. I laid it out for him. Simple, direct. I didn't tell him about Michael and Sarah's visit. I didn't complain about my family. That wasn't his business. I just told him what I wanted to do. "I want to sign the deed of the barbershop over to someone," I said. "A gift, free and clear." He listened patiently, his fingertips steepled under his chin. He didn't show any surprise. He just asked the questions a good lawyer should ask. "The recipient's name?" "David Washington. Is he family?" "No." "And your son, Michael? Is he aware of this?" "No," I said. "And I'd prefer he not be, until it's done." Mr. Henderson looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. He saw something in my face, I think. He saw the resolve. He didn't push. He just nodded. "All right, Arthur," he said. "It's your property. You can do with it as you see fit. I'll draw up the quitclaim deed. We'll need David to come in and sign the transfer documents." It's straightforward, and it was. The law was simple. Property, ownership, transfer. It didn't concern itself with sentiment or disappointment. It was clean. Leaving his office, I felt lighter. I had taken the first step. I was steering my own ship again. The wind was at my back. That evening, David came to the shop to sweep up, just like always. I was there cleaning my clippers. The place was empty except for us. The sound of his broom whispering across the floor was a familiar, comforting rhythm. "David," I said, my voice sounding louder than I intended in the quiet room. He stopped sweeping and looked at me. "Yes, Mr. Arthur." I took a deep breath. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to come with me tomorrow morning to a lawyer's office downtown." He looked confused. A flicker of worry crossed his face. Am I in some kind of trouble? I almost smiled. That was the boy, always thinking the worst for himself, always expecting the other shoe to drop. "No, son," I said. "You're not in any trouble at all." Just the opposite. The next morning, we sat in Mr. Henderson's office. David was wearing his best shirt, his hands clasped nervously in his lap. He looked around at the towering bookshelves as if he expected them to fall on him. Mr. Henderson was all business. He explained the document in plain language. A quitclaim deed, a transfer of ownership of the property at 1422 Elm Street, including all fixtures and equipment therein. From me, Arthur James Robertson, to him, David Michael Washington. David just stared at the papers. He read them, then read them again. His eyes were wide. He looked from the papers to Mr. Henderson, and then to me. "Mr. Arthur," he whispered. His voice was thick. "I don't understand." This says you're giving me the shop, that's right," I said, keeping my own voice steady. "But why?" "I can't afford to buy it. It's not for sale," I said. "It's a gift. For 10 years of sweeping my floors. For fixing my record player. For listening to a bunch of old men talk about the good old days." A tear traced a path down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He just sat there, stunned. This is your whole life, Mr. Arthur, and now it's yours," I said. "There's just one condition." He looked at me, ready to agree to anything. "Keep the music playing," I said. "And keep a chair open for me." He nodded, unable to speak. He picked up the pen Mr. Henderson offered him, his hand trembling slightly. He signed his name on the line. I signed mine. It was done. We walked out of the building into the bright morning sun. David was quiet, clutching the folder of documents to his chest like it was a winning lottery ticket. "I don't know what to say," he finally managed as we stood on the sidewalk. "You don't have to say anything," I told him. "Just be a good barber. The neighborhood needs 1 inch." I handed him the brass key. His fingers closed around it. He looked down at the key, then back up at me. The gratitude in his eyes was overwhelming. It was a look of pure, unadulterated grace. It was a look I hadn't seen from my own son in a long, long time. The call started 2 days later. It was Michael. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice casual. Too casual. "Just checking in. So, I spoke to that realtor, Brenda. She said she called you, but hadn't heard back. She's really motivated. Thinks she can get a quick sale." I sat in my armchair, the phone resting against my ear. I listened to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. "Dad? You there?" "I'm here, Michael, so what do you think? Should I tell Brenda to move forward with the listing?" This was it, the moment of truth. I could have told him then, but I didn't. I wasn't ready to have the argument. I wanted to hold on to the peace of my decision for a little longer. "There's no need for that," I said. "What do you mean?" "We need to get the ball rolling if we want to sell before the end of the quarter. The shop is no longer for sale," I said. My voice was calm, even. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What are you talking about? Did you get a better offer?" "Dad, you should have told me. We need to handle this properly. Make sure you're not getting taken advantage of. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. "I handled it," I said. "Everything is taken care of." "What does that mean, handled it?" His voice was getting tight. The casual tone was gone. "It means exactly what I said. Goodbye, Michael." I hung up the phone. I didn't slam it down. I placed it gently back in its cradle. My heart was beating a little faster, but my hands were steady. He called back 30 seconds later. I let it ring. He called again. I let it ring. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text message. I didn't read it. I deleted it. An hour later, Sarah called. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "Arthur," Michael said, "you had a confusing conversation. We're just a little worried about you. Is everything okay? Did someone from that developer company pressure you into something?" "I'm fine, Sarah," I said, and nobody pressured me. "Well, what's this about the shop not being for sale? We have a plan, remember? A good plan that helps everyone, helps everyone." She meant it helps them. "My plans have changed," I said. "Arthur, you can't just change the plan. We've all agreed. It's for the best." "We did not all agree," I said, and the truth of that statement felt like a steel rod in my spine. "You and Michael agreed." I listened. I hung up on her, too. The rest of the week was a siege. Calls I didn't answer. Voicemails I deleted without listening to. Text messages that piled up, unread. It was strangely liberating. For years, I had made myself available. I had answered every call, accommodated every request, adjusted my life to fit the small spaces they left for me. Silence was a new language for me, and it was a powerful one. I spent the week doing things for myself. I worked in my small garage, sanding down an old wooden chair I planned to refinish. The scrape of the sandpaper on the wood was a satisfying sound. I was taking something old and neglected and making it beautiful again, solely for myself. I went to the grocery store and bought the ingredients for a proper Sunday dinner, the kind my wife used to make. A roast chicken, collard greens, sweet potatoes. I cooked all afternoon, filling the house with good smells. I ate at my dining room table, with a real plate and a cloth napkin. I played a John Lee Hooker record while I ate. The house didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. It felt like mine. On Saturday, they came. I saw their car pull up through the front window. A big, silver SUV that was too clean. They marched up the walkway, Michael in the lead, Sarah a step behind him. Their faces were grim. I met them at the door. I didn't invite them in. I just stood there on the threshold, blocking the way. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" Michael started, his voice a low, angry growl. "You won't answer your phone. Brenda called me. She said the property title for the shop was transferred. She said you gave away, that's right," I said. He stared at me, his mouth hanging open slightly. He looked like he couldn't process the words. "You gave it away? The shop? Our inheritance?" There was the truth, naked and ugly. Our inheritance. Not my life's work. Not my father's legacy. A check they were expecting to cash. Sarah pushed forward. "Arthur, this is crazy. Who did you get it to? You've been swindled. We can get a lawyer. We can fight this." "You're not in your right mind. My mind has never been clearer," I said, and my voice was as calm as a frozen lake. "I gave it to David Washington. He's been sweeping the floors for 10 years. He respects the place." Michael's face went from confused to furious. "The kid who sweeps the floors? You gave a piece of property worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to the janitor? Are you insane? He called David a janitor, a boy I'd watched grow into a fine young man, a boy with more character in his little finger than Michael had in his whole body. He's not a janitor, I said, my voice dropping low. He's the new owner, and soon he'll be the new barber. I'm your son. Michael shouted, his voice cracking. That shop was supposed to be for me, for my family. The shop was never for you, Michael, I said. The words came out clean and sharp. The shop is for someone who will care for it. You wanted to sell it for scrap. You wanted to tear its heart out for a down payment on a bigger cage in your gilded zoo, Sarah gasped, placing a hand on Michael's arm. Arthur, that is a horrible thing to say. We were only thinking of you. We wanted to make your life easier. No, I said, looking her straight in the eye. You wanted to make your life easier. You wanted me out of the way, packed up in a box. Simplified, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. She knew I was right. Michael just shook his head, still reeling. I don't believe this. After everything we've done for you. And that's when I let the final key turn in the final lock. I let the last piece of the puzzle fall into place. You want to talk about everything you've done? I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the air like a razor. I'll tell you what you've done. 2 weeks ago, you sat in my living room. You thought I was in the kitchen. The door was open. I heard you. I paused. I let the silence stretch. I watched the color drain from their faces. Sarah, I said, looking at her. You said, this is taking too long. He's so stubborn. And Michael, I turned to my son, my only child. I heard you laugh. You said, I know. Sometimes I wonder why he even bothers to stick around. You said it was a joke. The memory was seared into my mind. I hadn't just heard the words. I had felt them, like a physical blow. They thought I was a piece of furniture that had overstayed its welcome, a ghost haunting their balance sheets. Michael's face crumpled. He had the decency to look ashamed. Sarah just stared at the ground. I heard you, I repeated. I heard you wonder why I was still alive. And in that moment, I realized you were right. This version of me, the one who waits for his son to call, the one who hopes for a visit, the one who lives for the scraps of attention you throw him, that man needed to stop sticking around. So he did, Dad. I didn't mean it like that, Michael stammered. It was a stupid, a terrible joke. A joke has to be funny, I said. There's an old saying. A man who gives his belongings to his children before he dies is a fool. He ends up with a staff in his hand, begging for a place at their table. I'm not a fool, Michael, and I won't be a beggar. I looked at them, standing on my porch. They looked smaller, somehow, diminished. The anger was gone, replaced by a hollow shock. They had never seen this man before, this man who stood up for himself. They were used to the quiet, accommodating father who nodded and bought them silence. He was gone. The shop is David's, I said, my voice firm. That is done. This house is mine. My life is mine. You are welcome in it when you learn to see me as a man and not as a problem to be solved or a bank to be broken. Until then, I think this conversation is over. And I closed the door. I didn't slam it. I closed it gently. The latch clicked into place with a quiet, final sound. I leaned my back against the wood, and I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 20 years. I was not shaking. I was not angry. I was not sad. I felt steady. I walked back to my armchair and sat down. The house was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of peace. The silence of a battle won not with shouting, but with truth. A few days later, I walked down to the barbershop. The lights were on. Through the window, I could see David. He was standing by the first chair, a young boy sitting in it. David was holding the clippers, his movements careful and precise. He was talking to the boy, a calm smile on his face. The old record player was on the counter. I could hear the faint, sweet sound of Smokey Robinson singing. The gold lettering on the window had been touched up. It gleamed in the afternoon sun. Underneath, Arthur's barbershop. In smaller, newer letters, it said, Prop. David Washington. He hadn't changed the name. I didn't go in. Not yet. It was his now. He needed to make it his own. I just stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching. A legacy wasn't a building. It was a spirit, and the spirit of that place was safe. It was in good hands. I turned and walked home. My steps felt lighter. I had given away my shop, but I had gotten back my life. In the weeks that followed, my life settled into a new rhythm. It was a quiet rhythm dictated by my own wants and needs. I woke up when I wanted. I worked on my chair in the garage, the wood slowly taking on a new life under my hands. I read books I've been meaning to read for years. I sat on my porch and watched the world go by. I started playing dominoes with some of the other old-timers at the community center on Wednesdays. We'd talk about politics and grandchildren and the price of things. They didn't want anything from me but a good game and a shared story. It was easy. It was real. One afternoon, David showed up at my door. He was holding a brown paper bag that smelled of fried fish. "Brought you some lunch, Mr. Arthur," he said, "from the place down by the river." I let him in, and we sat at my kitchen table, eating fish and fries out of the bag. "How's it going at the shop?" I asked him. "It's good," he said, a look of quiet wonder still on his face. "It's a lot. The paperwork, ordering supplies. But it's good. The regulars are all still coming." Mr. Harris told me a story about a poodle that stole his mailbag. I smiled. "That sounds like Harris." We ate in comfortable silence for a bit. Then he looked at me, his expression serious. "My mom wants to thank you," he said. "She cried when I told her. She said you gave me a future." "You earned your future, David," I said. "I just signed the papers." He shook his head. "You did more than that. You saw me. When most people just saw a kid sweeping floors, he was right. I had seen him. And in the end, that's all any of us really want. To be seen. To be valued not for what we can provide, but for who we are." My own son had stopped seeing me. He only saw an obstacle between him and a pot of money. After David left, I went back to my armchair. A letter had come in the mail. It was from Michael. I recognized his impatient scrawl on the envelope. I let it sit on the end table for 3 days. I wasn't afraid to open it. I just wasn't in a hurry. My time was my own. When I finally did, it was a single page. "Dad," it said, "I am sorry. I'm sorry for what I said. I'm sorry for how I've been. I don't have an excuse. You were right. I was thinking about the money, and I stopped thinking about you. I don't blame you for what you did with the shop. I probably would have done the same thing if I were you. I hope one day you can forgive me. I like to see you, not to talk about money or houses or anything else, just to see my father. Michael." I read the letter twice. It was a start, a crack of light under a door that had been sealed shut. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't a magic wand that could wave away years of casual neglect. But it was something. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I didn't call him. Not yet. Forgiveness, like respect, has to be earned. He had taken a first step on a long road. I would let him walk it for a while. I picked up my book and continued to read. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, warm on my face. The house was quiet. My house. My quiet. I was not a burden. I was not a nest egg. I was not a problem to be simplified. I was Arthur James Robertson, and I was finally, completely my own man. I was free.